Victoria, we're live! Hi. Hello, if you are joining us, this is for our patrons. This is for reaching how many patrons?
Reaching $2,000.
$2,000.
2,000.
Congratulations on
Yes.
being the inaugural member of the inaugural Patreon live stream.
Yes.
Woot! I would like for us to begin with Callie telling us what she's been doing for the past 2 days. Where did you go and what did you do? Because I doubt that they will believe it.
So it's been a busy week for me. Tuesday, I left Missoula in the afternoon and drove to Spokane, Washington. It's 3 hours to the west of us. And saw Jurassic Park, the original, the OG, 1993, at the movie theater for the 25th anniversary, and it was amazing. And I cried, and
Really?
it was just like the when they first see the dinosaurs all out there, welcome to Jurassic Park, all that stuff. Like that gets me like every time.
Freaking
It's so like, and also like. The dinosaur was huge. I don't remember it 100% in the theater. So it was nice to get that.
But every time you'd fly, you watched Jurassic Park.
Yes, and
so
every
you've seen
time
it like 100,000 times.
A million times, yeah. And it was like an empty movie theater. If you follow me on Instagram, I freaked out. We got in there right before the movie started, and there was nobody there. There's nobody there.
Really?
Right before the actual movie started, not all the extra stuff. A group of 5 came in, so we weren't all by ourselves. I was just like, man, Spokane is lame. How did that?
So just to establish the groundwork of the community that you're a part of, Callie drove 3 hours to see Jurassic Park on the big screen for the first time, though.
Well,
and actually, last weekend I saw 2001 on the big screen for the first time since early 90s, probably, if ever.
And then
in
this weekend I saw The Meg, which is a megalodon, and it was not as good as Jurassic Park.
Oh, that's a high one.
But the week before, Callie got to see for the first time another classic 1993 dinosaur movie.
Oh, yeah.
I wasn't part of this party.
It made my eyes bleed.
Yeah.
I'm not we gotta have a palate cleanser before volume 2 on that movie.
Yeah, we watched the 1993 Roger Corman film Carnosaur on my podcast Real Bad, where Callie talks about it, and Callie and Sari Riley both got to exasperately talk about the science in that movie. So
bad.
It was a big week of movies.
Oh man, yeah, it was. It has been a big week of movies.
Yeah. So Mark, Seth, what have you guys watched?
Oh boy.
I don't know.
Just this live stream really is the only video.
Well, you guys just got back from Missoula not that long ago.
Yeah, we did. Great.
How'd you like it? Did you like Missoula? No. Yeah,
I always love going to Missoula. It's like a sneak peek of fall.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we have a plan for this live stream. We're going to do 3 things. Is that right?
Yep. Like
so the first one, we're just going to talk about how Eons is made. So each of us is going to talk a little bit about our parts in it. Then I'm saying this, I have nothing pulled up. What's after that?
That's what I was trying to pull up. The storm news, right?
Current events, ancient news.
Currently ancient news.
Yes.
And then some Q&A, some AMA.
Yep. Yeah. Q&A, AMA.
And some of the questions that Victoria sent to us are little tiny research projects, so they could be developed into an episode someday, because I don't think I could answer some of them just off the top of my head. But there's some good ones, though. There's some good ones.
Excellent. Let's do some quick introductions. We're going to introduce ourselves and make sure everybody knows what we do on the show. Let's start with our Indianapolis team. Mark and Seth, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Seth. I co-produce, edit, and co-animate. So I just handle a lot of the post-production work on Eons.
I'm Mark Olson, and I only animate. That's all I do.
On this show.
They are the reason that Eons is as beautiful as it is.
Yeah.
Which is not a word that I use lightly. But every time I see them, I'm like, the work that you do is magic.
Yeah.
Yes.
It is. I remember when we got the first proofs back from them, we were like,
yeah. I
this
know.
is
And
gorgeous.
all the design and all the backgrounds and the logos. I was like, I couldn't have designed it better. I don't think. good enough for sure.
Yeah.
My first thought was I got to raise my game
Yeah.
to match the visual quality of the show. Like, oh, I really got to.
I'm Nick Jenkins. I am a producer and director. So once we get a script, I work with the hosts, usually with Nicole Sweeney, who helps me out on the set, who is working diligently on another project right now. And we shoot the thing, takes about an hour to 2 hours. And then I zip the footage off to Seth and Mark.
So I'm Callie. I'm co-host and fact checker. So when things slip through my fingers, I feel really bad. And I suffer through scripts as I read them.
Usually the bird scripts.
Usually the
Because
bird
my
script.
writing is so bad.
No. The names are so hard to pronounce. and nobody puts pronunciation guides with their publications. So like,
Oh, yeah.
they give a new species name and they're like, look at this great new species. Guess how you pronounce it. And that's what we do. We guess how
Like
they're pronounced.
Shirka, Sasher. Yeah.
There's some tough
Yeah.
ones out there.
A
But
lot
yeah,
of it is just phonetics.
it
It
is.
is, but it's also, I really wonder if most paleontologists are just used to communicating via written word.
Yeah. And like,
Yeah.
I'm sure it sounds great in Latin, but no one has ever heard that. So
Yeah.
Yeah. And so when you've got a script where we're talking about 15 different species, it gets to be quite the gymnastics.
It is.
And
it is.
Callie and Blake and Hank all have to suffer through that.
and getting the images for oftentimes
Oh,
we
yeah.
end up talking about things that have never actually been depicted visually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like there's no life reconstruction of it.
Mhm.
Which is another thing that Seth and Callie, but Seth does a
Yeah,
lot
that's
of
what I said.
is talking to people who own the rights to specific images for things that we want to show, or talking to illustrators who can illustrate something for us, which is, in my opinion, aside from the writing, holy crap, that sounds like the hardest thing of this whole process.
Yeah, tracking
Yeah.
down images and getting researchers to contact you back in a timely manner is a challenge.
On
Everyone's
rare
idea of
occasions-
timely is so different.
That is like, what's 3 months to a week?
Yeah.
On rare occasions, I get very delicately worded slacks, usually from Seth, about like, so turns out that no one has ever drawn this organism before. Like,
What do we do?
had that not occurred to you? And like, it's already in the can. Like,
Oh, yeah, it's already
shot.
been
Like,
filmed.
well,
Like this episode is going up in a week.
yeah.
And we don't have images. So that's usually the panicked battle at the end.
Yeah.
Yep.
Is finding
Oh, which is
images.
my role. So I'm Blake DeFastino, and I'm content chief for Complexly, and I am script editor for Eons and also co-producer, co-host.
Lots of things.
Yeah.
Do we want to really quickly talk about how Eons came to be?
Sure.
Yeah, I feel
Actually,
like
we haven't talked about
we
that,
just
have we?
did this internally, and so I'm like, did we already talk about this? Blake, why don't you take it since you?
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like we were both sort of on the tail end of the conversation, but it probably was like 2015.
2014, 2015, somewhere
Yeah.
around there.
PBS. So PBS is underwritten or sponsored some of our other content, especially Crash Course, which Complexly produces. And they came to us, and I wasn't part of the conversation because they don't let me touch any money or like sharp objects in the office. It's just like the grown-ups are talking. But apparently there were conversations about PBS coming to us and saying, let's do a show about dinosaurs. And so they talked, for that went on for months. And then the fellow who was like the operations officer, the business manager at the time, came to me and said, what do you think? I'm like, no one loves dinosaurs more than I do, because at the time I ran a blog about archaeology and paleontology.
This is his own shirt that he made.
Yes, on DFTBA.
T-Rex. Get it?
She is an actual paleontologist. And I was like, that's interesting. It's been done. And he's like, what do you mean? And so I started to explain to him, you can't talk about like a specific organism or group of organisms in any sort of meaningful way without establishing a context about where they came from or what they turned into, what their evolutionary relationships are, and then they're like the environmental contexts of it. So basically, yes, but, or like yes and, yes and, let's make it about a channel about the story of life on Earth. And he's like, well, that's different.
That's a lot.
And so it was another like 2 years of back and forth, yada, yada, yada. Callie came into the picture because you were on SciShow Talk Show, right?
Yeah.
Before
yeah.
this happened.
And Caitlin saw me doing an activity at Spectrum, our local science museum, I think, and was like, "Hey, you got a cool
Or the Natural
job."
History Center, maybe.
I think it was Spectrum, the old space at Spectrum.
Oh.
And she was like, "Hey, you got a cool job. You should be on SciShow Talk Show." And then I was like, "Cool." And it was like the longest SciShow Talk Show ever.
That's saying something.
Me and Hank was talking like geeked out about fossils for like 45 minutes. That was crazy. And then they were like, "Hey, you're pretty good at that. You want to come in for a screen test?" And I was like, "Okay, sure." And I think it was Michael, Rhonda, and Caitlin. And they gave me just a random script.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And
No, I was there too.
Not that time.
Oh, I was not there that time?
Not the first time.
Oh, okay.
Huh.
And this is in the old building too.
Yeah.
And so after that, they were like, "Oh, well, that actually went pretty well. You want to come back and do it in front of a bunch of people?" I was like, "Okay." And so then I think it was Caitlin, Michael, you, Hank.
No, the first time we did it, which was in that other building, it was just like me and Caitlin.
Oh, I thought
Yeah.
there was some people that I did not know at the time.
Yeah.
And although you and Michael look very different, though.
Oh, yeah.
Like I would remember that. Anyways, and then they started talking to me about this idea and how it would be awesome if I was involved. And I was like, "Yeah, great, sure, awesome, sign me up." And then it was like radio silence for like a year.
Yep.
March to March. And I was just like, "Yeah, this isn't going to happen."
It didn't occur to me I didn't have to do a screen test. I never did a screen test and probably should
Well, because you had done Smart Blake.
So one day in our old studio, Hank was sick. He came down with something. And we were shooting, like Emily Grassley or someone was in town, and we were shooting SciShow quiz show. And so the producer, Caitlin Hoffmeister, asked me if I would host. I'm like, I can't word. I did it. And when this thing came up, they're like, "You'll do, I guess."
That's how we do all job offers.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Yeah, you'll do it.
Okay, should we go into how it's made?
Did we do that?
We did kind of do
Like how
that.
an episode was made, I mean.
You mean from a writing perspective?
Or just like how an episode was made, as opposed to how the channel came to be.
I do a little bit more of a detailed breakdown of like how an episode,
Okay.
like
Whatever the fan wants.
yeah, a little bit more detail into like what goes into making an episode.
I think really you need to start with the writing process because that
Yes.
is it's so different than
Crutch.
anything else we do here, I feel like.
The hardest part is finding writing talent, like people who know the science first. That's always my first criterion. And then people who are also good storytellers. So they can get me, an English major, as some of you know if you're regular viewers. If they can get me to understand it, then they can do the job. But I want them to understand the science first so that I'm learning something and that it's accurate and clear and entertaining, which is very hard to find.
Yeah.
A lot of our content comes from working paleontologists like Callie. Probably our most prolific writer is Dr. Megan Wetherell, who you know. She's a paleontologist from Central Washington University.
Ooh, Oreodonts.
She's I love Oreodonts, which I want to do an episode about because
Yes.
they sound delicious.
They are strange.
They're like, Blake, that's not what that means. And another, actually, we recently did our first episode on human evolution about bipedalism, and that was written by Dr. Darcy Shapiro, who's a paleoanthropologist at Rutgers. And it just takes, like weeks and months of sort of casting around. Every now and then we post notices for like people who are, if you're interested, if you know about Eons and you want to contribute to it, send us your, links and a resume. And we always look for people with training in that field and also whenever possible, like a SciComm piece of it. So they pitch me on ideas and the pitch is usually like, here is a topic and this is why the topic is interesting. Like this would be the substance of how I talk about it. And this is why I think someone would sit through it for 10 minutes, as opposed to like, what's up with sloths? That's not really a pitch. Sloths are like, there's a lot to say about sloths.
We need to do a sloth.
Yes, actually Megan just pitched me on
Avocado sloths?
No, about like aquatic, terrestrial, and arboreal sloths.
That is cool.
The
That's
sloth
cool.
sandwich.
Newest planet Earth with that sloth swimming. Oh my god.
Yes.
That's amazing.
He hears the mating call and he's like, I'm
Oh, I
very
gotta do
slowly
this.
getting there. Yeah. It'll be so worth it. And then she's not there when he gets there.
In case you haven't noticed, we have paleontology nerds
Yeah.
working on this show.
I think sloths will do. Where was I? Oh, so then we craft that pitch. Like the writer and I agreed, this is something that you would want to watch. And mainly, we reached that point where we realized that we understand together mutually what the story is that we want to tell. And so sometimes it has to do with a really engaging central figure, like I forget his name now, but the dire wolf in the dire wolf episode, like our lead character with the broken baculum. Let's never speak of it again.
He was just a few numbers and letters.
Yeah, LACMHC 8291.
Yeah, there we go.
I said it so many times, I remember it now.
Yeah.
THX 1138.
Film.
Yeah,
joke.
some of my film nerds got it.
Film joke.
Was that on the old VHS?
Yeah, it was Lucas's first feature film.
Yeah, I started it and I was like, ugh.
Oh no, it's no good.
Yeah.
But anyway,
it was on Netflix a couple of years ago. I'm like, oh, what just happened? So the next step is they outline it, because I just want everyone to like have a really lucid sense of what we're going to say before we even begin drafting. And then when the drafting happens, it goes back and forth 2 or 3 times usually, and then Callie is brought in to fact check it. And as soon as I share it with Callie, I share it with Mark and Seth, so they could start thinking about the visual component. And then usually, like 12 hours or less before we shoot, I share it with Nick in the studio. I'm trying to get better about that, but like, it doesn't come easily.
They take time.
It takes so much time. It takes weeks to develop a script, a single script. And then we have many of them going on parallel, you see, so that it's like every day I'll work on one script and then send it back to rewrite, move on to the next script, and then hope for the best.
Well, and it's just, we learned this, we developed this process as we were going, because we'd never done it before.
Yeah.
So this is like, if you look at something like we produce like Crash Course, we know what the whole year is going to look like. Like we have it laid out.
Mm-hmm.
Even if we don't know specific, the specific paragraph in the specific script, we know that, okay, well, we can be working on these topics and we can get everything outlined. Whereas here, we're not as sure. There's just a lot that we think, there are times we'd be like, think it'd be a great pitch, and then we find out this really doesn't work. And so what the heck are we going to do?
And it took us a couple of months. We talked about this internally. We did like a complexity-wide meeting on Friday. And it took us a couple of months, it took me anyway, a couple of months to figure out how Eons was different than other shows we did.
Yeah.
And that they weren't explainer videos.
Mm.
And I am actually beholden mainly to Seth and Mark, because I feel like they created such a vibrant environment, that I sort of took their cues from their visual work, that really what we're trying to do is transport you and other people to a certain place in a certain time to get you to think about the world as it used to be and how we got to where we are now. That was many months of sort of like script after script coming to that reckoning. And then once we realized that's what we wanted to do, we realized how time consuming it is to actually like craft a narrative every week.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But
that's what we do.
So then we shoot it,
Mm-hmm.
and then Nick, why don't you talk about Seth and Mark too.
The shooting part of it is pretty straightforward. We shoot all on a green screen. We shoot what we would call vertically. So we tilt the camera on its side so we have the host's head to toe. And we initially did this so we could show scale. One of the things that when we were initially pitching Eons and we were trying to wrap our heads around what it was going to be was understanding scale, not just in terms of like, how big is a dinosaur, although that's important, but even scale in terms of time. Initially, our first title for the show was Deep Time, but PBS already had Deep Look in Space Time, so that was a no-go.
Brand confusion, yeah.
So we went with Eons, which I actually like better.
Yeah, me too.
But it was all about understanding scale and crafting a narrative so we could understand that scale. And so that's why we shoot head to toe. So there's an opportunity. We don't use it as much as I initially thought we were going to, but every time we do use it, I get real giddy.
Yeah,
I know.
Shoot that more often.
I got to be a scale bar for Quetzalcoatlus.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So that's how we do it. It's pretty straightforward. We just got to muscle through most of these because there are some real tongue twisters in there. And a lot of my job and Nicole's job on set is something can look really good and clear when it's written, but a lot of times it is
You have to like
almost impossible to say.
It's insane. I never would have thought that the written word would be so different than just trying to like say it out loud. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
There was one point where it was is this right around the Ordovician Silurian?
Ordovician Silurian.
Biodiversity. No. Biodiversity.
Ordovician biodiversification event.
But it was an extinction event. I remember. Was it? I can't remember. And it took me so many takes that I got the giggles. And I'm like, Nick, say something that make me stop laughing. And he's like, we're talking about extinction. Oh, okay. Whew. I just cleansed my. Okay.
Yeah.
Ordovician Silurian biodiversification event.
And and this is something that goes through all of our series because it's not just the scientific words. It's also just written things. One very simple word next to another simple word. They're two simple words, but when you put them together, all of a sudden they become very difficult to say.
Particularly,
or
I hate that word.
Research suggests.
Research suggests, yeah.
Try saying research suggests real fast, and all of a sudden.
Some guys think.
Yeah.
That's much easier.
Yeah, so there's a lot there that we work with. We work with each host to try to help them find the most comfortable way to say it, so it's a little easier to hear and it's easier to perform. But at the end of the day, the information has to be right. So we can't change it in a way that would alter the information. So there's not too much of that, but if we can, we do try to find that when we're on set. And then occasionally, allowing for Blake and Callie and Hank to insert jokes or whatever, as long as we all think that it's appropriate. We lost video. Hold on.
Man.
I'm working on it. Tell me when we're back.
Oh, you're back. Really good.
All right, we're on a new system. So yeah, that's pretty much the shooting process. Then we take all of the. We also shoot in. This may be, I don't know, Greek to some people, but we're shooting on a 4K camera, which is a really big image.
Terrifying when you first are told that.
Yeah, it's a really big image that allows Seth and Mark to manipulate the image more in post-production, but that also means there's super big files, and we work with Google Drive to set all of the files to Seth and Mark overnight. Hopefully, usually it takes about 2 days to get the files there to Indianapolis. And it's just because...
Wow, I had no idea.
Yeah, it takes a while. And that's partially because a lot of times I will set them to go overnight and then I'll come in the next morning and for some reason Google Drive decided to stop uploading them. And so that's why I'm here often on the weekends is just to make sure that they got transferred. So we transfer them to Seth and Mark, and then at that point, it goes to Seth and Mark. Guys, tell us about your process.
So I will when Blake sends me the script, I'll go through it and start marking it up with images that I think would work for certain lines. So we break it up by line. And then if there's a species of an animal that we need to find an image of or something like that, I'll start flagging those and ask Callie for advice on certain parts of the script. A lot of the times, most of the time when I get a script, I'm learning along while editing it. So I try to wrap my head around the story being told, and then kind of dive in on the animations. And then Mark and I will split up the animation work. Mark does a lot of the beautiful full screen diorama style images. I do a lot of the more explanatory, mostly key science concepts animations, and then I will edit it together. I'll export a version of the video with after it's been keyed, so that subsequent exports aren't incredibly long.
Tell everybody what keying means.
Oh, taking green screening. So taking the green screen out and putting the host in front of a cool background that Mark made. And then after that, I will identify moments in the script that I think are good, tone shifts, I guess. So like, and then that will dictate how the music kind of goes along.
Interesting.
When the script comes to an end of a point, I'll make a marker. So then I know how long, what kind of music or how long music should be. And there's
I think it's the only show in Missoula, at least, where music is used.
I never thought about that.
So I show kids sound, but
Yeah.
not really.
I never thought about that. That's interesting.
But I think, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you guys used music a lot in 100 Days.
Yeah, I started here working on 100 Days, so that kind of informs how I approached Eons, actually. And that probably is part of the reason why there's a narrative arc to it, because 100 Days was a very narrative show.
Huh. A lot of people viewers ask about where you get the music.
We use a service, I think all of PBS uses, we also use it for our assignment as well. Mark uses it for our assignment. APM is the name of the service. It's just like a giant library of all different kinds of music. And that's quite the process of kind of trying to find exactly what we need for a specific episode. You want kind of a similar tone throughout. So it's good to have something. Sometimes we'll have time to like really think it out and think it through and lay it out. And sometimes it's kind of just a quick like this like helps move the episode along. So yeah, but that's always a fun part too, is kind of adding that layer at the end of the edit. And then there's a lot of back and forth after the first draft is done in terms of what I got wrong. We are not by no means experts or even close to that when it comes to this stuff. So we lean heavily on Callie and Blake and our writers to fact check us. And then we'll make sure that it's good to go. PBS will screen it as well and give us notes. And then, yeah, we upload it. Did that cover everything?
Yeah. I'm feeling under the weather, so when I talk, I cough. So Seth has to do it all for me now. So, but I have nothing else to add also. So it all worked out.
Yeah.
Great. The stuff that you do is just incredible. I think you should get this for a stunt that you pulled. It was like maybe 6 months ago, and we had to depict visually natural selection in like 5 seconds.
Yeah.
And you did it. You did like Darwin's moth thing.
Oh, that's right. Oh, yeah, that was like at that very end. Yeah.
Yeah, like the populations of moths, and the tree changes color, and the moths change color, and then there's a bird for the predation pressure. And it was kind of like a rebus puzzle, like visually, if you sound it out, it makes sense.
Yeah.
It's just amazing. It totally worked.
Yeah.
Once it's uploaded, let's talk a little bit about dealing with comments and
Notification squad.
And when we have possibly an error or just this has been a really interesting thing for me to learn about, because like most of my things on Crash Course, it's like if a commenter points out, if somebody, it doesn't even a commenter, but somebody points out something is wrong in Crash Course, it's usually either right or wrong.
Yeah.
But one thing that I've learned is that there's not always a clear delineation of right and wrong with paleontology.
Yeah. Yes.
So first, Seth is usually the first person to, as all of us are, whoever uploads is usually the person who's closely watching the comments for the first 24 hours. And so we'll get an email, I don't know, Tuesday night at 9, saying, hey, somebody has brought this up.
Like a pit in my stomach.
Yeah, me too.
Oh gosh.
Doesn't happen very often, I must say. And sometimes it takes a while for us to figure out, is it real or is it semantics?
Yeah.
You know, like Raptor X is a disputed taxon. Yep, it is. You just got to live with it.
Yep. Yeah. So yeah, definitely sometimes that a newer paper has come out that says something different than a long held belief.
Yeah.
And some people will immediately jump to it and just be like, well, what? I mean, it's wrong now because this new paper came out.
Right.
But that new paper is so new that science hasn't quite caught up to it yet. No independent researchers have looked at the specimen to draw the same or different conclusions. You know, it hasn't it hasn't been evaluated by more people. It's so new, So while the original researchers may be correct in their findings, it always takes other people looking at it to just double check, make sure that you did everything to the utmost scientific method standards. So yeah, sometimes we get caught in those crossfires for sure.
Yeah.
And I've seen that it also depends on what we're talking about that brings out that type of yes.
Yeah.
T-Rex.
Anything
anything.
Tyrannosaurs, Tyrannosauroids.
All of those guys.
Almost any kind of dinosaur or theropod especially.
Yeah.
Well, we actually did an episode, I think it might have been the dire wolves episode. I can't remember, where we were talking about like the 3 different ideas and we can't know if any one of them is correct.
Yeah.
And like that's paleontology a lot of times.
Yeah.
Well, we weren't there. The best we can do is like we have this element from here, we have this element from here, and then in the middle we have this weird one.
Yeah.
And all 3 point a different direction. And so, I think that's been the biggest learning curve for me is like, it's not just right and wrong. It's looking at discoveries and looking how those discoveries are framed.
Yeah.
And the internet in general is a big fan of right and wrong and embarrassing the wrong.
Yeah.
Like making sure that the wrong does not want to leave their homes.
Yeah.
Not like that. And it's been really fascinating to approach that with this show. And it's like, not right or wrong. Here are 2 ideas.
Yeah, they're just interpretations, and until we get more data or more specimens,
more data.
That's where they're going to stay. That's where they're going to stay.
I do get the sense that you and your fellow Eonites are, what you like about Eons is that we allow things to be subtle. And part of why complexity is called complexity is that we pride ourselves on treating difficult things difficultly and allowing complex things to be complex, right? We did a whole episode just last week about what we don't know about Raptor-X, how science cannot immediately answer all questions. And the thing is, the reason I think that this approach is valuable is because we live in a media environment where the media reports on the findings of a paper as fact.
Yeah.
And then people come to our show and then they'll say Hotchkiraptor is an aquatic dinosaur. Didn't you mention that? Like a paper said that in November, but like it's not the consensus,
Yet.
And like probably should have mentioned it, but also I'm not going to state that as fact because that's not how science works.
Yeah.
You should move on to like ancient news if you want to do that.
Yes. Speaking of flawed media, and actually I was thinking about this because one of the headlines I want to talk about is oldest animal ever discovered. Have you seen this?
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to let these 2 take over my spot here. I'm going to try to get some work done.
Thanks, Nick.
Would you?
Yes. I would. I would like to try to get some work done, Blake.
Thank you, Nick.
Yeah. I'll keep checking on the camera to make sure all is well.
Seth and Mark, are you going to stay with us and opine about current events?
We love hanging out. Yeah. But I'm going to mute me so that I don't interrupt your stories with my coughing.
Okay.
I don't know how to do that. I have to figure it out. Okay.
One of my favorite earlier episodes, like season 1, mid-season 1, was about Ediacaran biota.
Oh, yeah.
And that included Dickinsonia. And so one of the ancient news items we want to talk about was a paper that I think was released yesterday.
Really?
About Dickinsonia.
Nice.
And it's the media are describing it as oldest animal ever. And it's because of a fossil found in Russia, Dickinsonia, and it's like how do you describe it? The whole point is that we don't know exactly where in the tree of life it fits, but it's like
weird. It's like a
bilateral symmetry.
Yeah, bilateral
oval.
Symmetry, oval with repeating segments.
But like no limbs or anything.
Yeah, well, the way most Ediacaran fossils are preserved, it's more of like a death mask.
That's like Ediacaran.
It's tomato, I think. It's one of those.
Niche.
Yeah, niche. And so these Ediacaran animals died, and then microbes covered them up and created like a crust over the top of them. So they're almost like an imprint, but in the reverse. So we call it a death mask. So we don't have the animal itself.
Awesome.
Yeah, we don't have the animal itself. We just have this cast, this mold that's left behind of it. And so that's another added little, like, there's no soft body left. But I guess they found, what, cholesterol in a specimen?
They found what is described anyway as molecular fossil traces of cholesterol, a sterol or a lipid, which is only produced or manufactured by animals. So ergo, the thinking is this thing must be an animal.
But I feel like that we've thought that Dickinsonia was at least a metazoan. So a metazoan is an animal for a very long time. Like, I feel like the cholesterol is new, but the thinking that I guess maybe this is just more evidence that yes, they were metazoans than anything. But I agree with it. I'm fine with it.
And then they're like, calling it the oldest animal, I think, is sort of like ipso factically false, because that makes it sound like boop, it just kind of popped up out of nowhere. But obviously, there's something that came before it.
Obviously,
like at least the oldest known animal. Even then, there's a lot of controversy about the methodology that was used in this and what a biomarker of cholesterol actually is, because apparently they didn't find cholesterol itself.
Oh yeah,
they found these biomarkers.
So how good are
hydrocarbons? Yeah.
But that brings up a question that has been asked: that why is the Ediacaran, Ediacaran not the base of Paleozoic? Why is the Cambrian? Why doesn't it go back to 600 million years ish, or 635 instead of 542? So,
do you know what defines the boundary of the Phanerozoic?
So it historically was kind of the first occurrence of hard parts, but we keep pushing that back. So the Cambrian explosion and that whole idea that all of a sudden we went from like nothing to something came about because of the Burgess Shale up in British Columbia.
Oh, we just went there last year.
Yeah, I did go there. It's amazing. And so, like, we see this, and all of a sudden it's just like, you have hard parts. All of a sudden, these were the oldest fossils that we knew of, and that helped guide the boundary of the Paleozoic and the Phanerozoic. And so, what's happening there? So I think that it's a historical thing that keeps it there. So the Ediacaran was only found in the 70s, I think, with Sprigg.
Reginald Sprigg.
Yeah. And so we didn't even know, like, for 75 years, we didn't even know that there was squishy stuff before the Burgess Shale. So that's pushing us back, but the boundary hasn't been pushed back. Now, I could look, I have a geologic timescale book on campus that talks about the boundaries and what the boundaries are and where those type localities are. So the rock outcropping that you say, this is the boundary between said place and another place in the geologic timescale. So that book will have exactly why it's 252 plus or minus a few million years.
Interesting.
Yeah. But I think it's mainly just historical. It's just stayed there and everybody's comfortable with it. And now we just mention these late Precambrian communities as being precursors to Burgess Shale type localities. Yeah.
And as we mentioned, we did an FAQ episode a couple of months ago, and we mentioned the Anthropocene.
Yes.
And
still no
when
word.
It comes to geologic time, decisions are not made quickly.
Very
They
slowly.
change how we talk about geologic time. Probably dozens, if not hundreds, of scientists around the world argue about it for years, and then they issue reports to each other. I'm not one of them, so I don't read the reports, but it is not a speedy process.
No.
Callie, Alicia wants to know what book you're talking about.
It's literally called the Geologic Timescale. I think it's put out by GSA. It's a little pricey, so if you can find it in a library, that's the choice option for you. Let's see.
I am reading The Ends of the World, which was recommended to me actually by Johansson, if it's okay to be smart, and I love it because it's, get the dude's name, but some of you have probably read it. Have you read it?
Mm-mm.
Science journalist, and he goes around the world studying type sites of all the major extinction events, and just kind of like dissects all of theories around and hypotheses around all the extinction events, and interviews the scientists who are like sort of leading the charge in understanding what drives extinction. It's very well done. I love it.
I can't read about extinctions.
Does it bum you out?
It bums me out. I mean, I can read about ancient extinctions, but when you get into like the 6th mass extinction, it just breaks my heart. I can't handle it. But when we're like 65 million years removed from the last one, it makes it a little bit easier. So those books, they come out, it looks like every 2 years or so they have an updated one. The one that I'm thinking of, I think, was from 2010, but there's a 2012, and the most recent one is a concise geologic time scale, 2016. Looks like you can get it as an ebook. But these go through basically every single boundary and tell you why and where that boundary is. And they're really amazing books. They have just tons of information about the geologic time scale. J. Oog, O-G-G, last name.
That's who wrote it?
Editors. Yeah.
Oh. Can you talk about, there's one, another recent or ancient news event that you want to talk about, and it was a fossil within a fossil.
It was so cool. So last semester, I randomly took a class. I'm a staff member. I don't normally take classes, but I wanted to take entomology. I love insects so much, and I thought this is the year. So I got really into insects last year, and still am. And this year, probably the coolest insect fossil of all times was found. So yes, what happened was, well, modern times. Let's talk about modern times. There are parasitic wasps out there. There are wasps that only can reproduce by laying their eggs inside of another species, usually either a caterpillar or while they're in the pupa themselves. So these are known today, but scientists found all these little fossilized fly pupa. So the post-maggot phase, pre-fly phase. And yeah, here you go. And
you can
so,
see that. Can you make that out?
Maybe? Back up a little bit more. There's a really great article on Nat Geo about this. Yeah. So if you want to see some super cool images. So they found all these little fly pupa. So again, post-maggot, pre-fly. And they looked inside of them, and there's wasps. There's juvenile wasps inside, like growing inside the pupa because they were laid inside the pupa. Oh
and
my
it's
gosh.
curled up like a xenomorph inside of Sigourney Weaver.
Yes,
it's just
it looks like an
looking.
alien. It's amazing. And they found a lot of them, like a bunch of little rice grains, and threw it underneath, probably an electron microscope, I'm assuming, and found these wasps. And I think it was the first occurrence of a parasitoid fly pupa. I think that we.
How old is it? The preservation is amazing.
Here, you just had it up. I can't remember the name of it or the age of it. Let's see. Where was I at? Parasite fossils, Nat Geo.
And the last, we have time for one more.
35 million. They're 35 million. So they're from the Cenozoic.
Questions.
Oh,
okay.
Some questions.
We can always talk about the Great Dying some other time.
Yeah.
I think it's too soon for Callie.
Yeah, too soon.
She's very panicky about this.
So what started your interest in paleontology and discussing paleontology and education?
For me, I feel like I've always, as long as I can remember, I was interested in paleontology. My dad was an amateur naturalist, and he really enjoyed the natural world. And his family, my family, grew up in Kansas and Missouri. And so there's a lot.
I was wondering how long it's going to take for you to mention Kansas. It's always like a...
That's where I'm from. This is my origin story. So leave me alone.
That's okay.
So there's a lot of Mississippian, the Carboniferous age, 300-ish million-year-old sea fossils there. So I would collect coral and little clams and all sorts of stuff when I was a kid. And then the first time I declared I want to be a paleontologist when I grew up was somewhere between 2nd and 3rd grade for a school project.
Really?
Yeah. And then my enthusiasm waned a little bit in high school, and I was like, I'm going to be a biology teacher. And I got into college, and I was like, no, I'm not going to be a biology teacher. And I switched majors immediately and got into the geology department and minored in paleontology. Yeah, that's my story. How about you?
There's nothing wrong about being proud of being from Kansas.
Where are you from?
I talk a lot about being from Pittsburgh. Not because I'm proud of it, but because it allows me to bring up Jeff Goldblum, who's also from Pittsburgh.
Your
And
Jeff
so-
Goldblum impression was.
And I followed him on Twitter, and he's not following me back. It's been like months.
Oh, man.
Still waiting, Jeff. He does not have an accent, and neither do I. There's a certain Pittsburgh accent that I will not reproduce for you, although most of my family can do it. It's hard to pinpoint like when it began, but when I really became focused on paleontology is when I worked for National Geographic. I worked for their digital media outlet in the early 2000s. It's one of the first editors of their online news service, National Geographic News. And research would come in, founded by the society or somewhere else, and they would ask reporters what you want to cover. And everyone else who I worked with wanted to cover either space or animals. And so there's all this stuff that was left over.
All the cool stuff is
Yeah,
left over.
and like, so when my boss asked me, do I want to go to North Dakota to cover a dinosaur dig? I'm like, yes. Like, why would I not want to do that? So I went to Marmarth. It was the dino mummy. I think it was society-funded research.
Was that Leonardo?
That was after Leonardo.
Oh,
This was like
okay.
04 or 05, I think. And I became fascinated by how paleontology, and I also ended up covering a lot of archaeology, and I was fascinated by how archaeologists and paleontologists can use science to understand history. My brother's an historian, and I'm an English major, and I got my master's degree in American Studies, which is basically cultural and social history. My family thinks historically, but I was interested in like the scientific aspect of it, and like not just human history, but deep time, or archaeology is human history, of course. And I learned, so after I left Geographic, I started blogging about archaeology and paleontology, even though they're completely different fields. To me, it totally made sense. And
Sorry. There's
We're just-
footsteps. Can you hear the footsteps?
There's square dancing upstairs.
actually, yeah, they're physically lifting the building as we're doing this, and we're moving it to another location, so
Yeah.
that's why some of the boards are shifting.
We also deal with the footsteps while we film. So
Which is
not
in the
only-
basement,
Yeah.
and it's 2 stories up, and whenever someone goes to the bathroom, we're like, oh, gotta wait and
Wait for that.
He should
Okay,
do.
try to get your line in while they're doing their business before they walk back to their desk.
So I became interested in like archaeology and paleontology as things that were not really translated well, going back to how the media covers paleontology, how they're not really translated in a it's not done well, or it's not done in a meaningful way for the public. And that's what I saw as the opportunity with Eons.
Oh.
Any other questions?
Yes. I was trying to get the noise to stop.
Oh,
Philip wants to know, are there easy ways to get involved in paleontology project as an amateur? Are there volunteer opportunities to look out for?
Yeah, most museums have volunteer opportunities, whether that's helping with their outreach programs, so sitting at a booth and talking to people that come up to you and ask you about the specimens, to helping in a collection. So collections managers like myself have more projects than we will ever be able to finish in our entire lifetimes. And so being able to give somebody that project and be like, hey, curate all these, organize this drawer, is really great. That's another really easy way to get in. There's also local clubs that you can join to go out on field trips, to see places.
can you volunteer for a dig?
You can. There are some digs that have volunteer programs. The one off the top of my head, there's one in Florida
Huh.
that you can volunteer for. I feel like there's
the
another one.
Museum in Western Colorado in Grand Junction, I know, because I tried to do it this summer. I didn't get down there, but they own a quarry. The museum owns a quarry in southwestern Colorado, and there are digs where they take you out, and you not only like learn how to do the thing, but they have staff paleontologists who are working on specific research. The Cardiff County Museum in southeastern Montana, I think, has that too.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
do some amazing research.
So it's just kind of doing a little Google searching to find those places that do have the volunteer digs. But yeah, there's a ton of ways to be involved with paleo without being a professional, for sure.
Just wear sunscreen and bring lots of water.
Yeah, don't wear cotton.
Oh, that's a good point.
You get
Yeah.
hot and sweaty, and then you get more
Synthetics.
hot and more sweaty. Yeah, that's gross.
Take it from a pro.
I used to do it. I don't do it anymore. Yeah, hat and sunscreen for sure.
Okay. Are there any plans for other guest researchers, industry scientists, etc. on the show?
Ooh, so our new Patreon goal is $5,000, and that would allow us to travel and go and see more people and do more interviews style episodes, as well as maybe visit people in the field. I know Megan, one of our main writers, she's got a research site. I've got a little research site. It's not as impressive as Megan's, I guarantee, because I don't have giant mammals. It's all just insects, plants, and some amphibians. Fingers crossed we find some. So yeah, I think that we would love to do more episodes like that and go and visit. There's so much in Montana that like we could spend all of our money in Montana.
And I don't know if you all have seen, we did a Nerd Night for PBS earlier this year.
Yeah.
And we did a whole presentation on a site that Callie is working on. And we did the whole presentation about how we're going to go out there this summer.
It didn't happen.
Second year in a row. It's
place
like
is
fates are
cursed.
conspiring against us to cover this site. But can you briefly tell them about that site, because it's so interesting.
It's a really neat spot. We're not exactly sure how old it is. We think it's near the boundary of the Eocene, Oligocene, so somewhere like 30, 35 million years old. It's an old lake bed, and it's a really neat stratigraphic sequence. So the rock sequence is very interesting. It starts with this jumble of mud, stone, grossness, and then it goes into like a 2-foot coal bed, and then it goes into all of these oil shales. And some of the lower oil shales are so oily, they're so petroleum rich that you can actually light them on fire, which is insane, lighting your research rocks on fire. But there was fires, and we lost a camera. So it's paper shale. So the shale itself breaks off in like super thin layers, almost like pages of a book. And there's lots of plants, lots of invertebrates like insects, kind of why I took that entomology class. And then also some frogs, tadpoles, and salamanders. So we haven't found any mammals yet.
That is a great example of a site that we could explore if we had the resources to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And also if the place is not either flooded or on fire.
Or under snow.
Which is
a very small window in Montana, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not raining or snowing or fire.
And then Megan Weatherell, who I mentioned, she's working on a site in pretty much central Washington near Ellensburg.
Mm-hmm.
And I forget what she's working on there, but she just emailed us about it.
I think it was Oreodonts, wasn't it?
Was it Oreodonts? Delicious. Like we dumped the Oreodonts.
Oh my gosh. That would be why somebody hasn't made a cookie called the Oreodont.
We're going to be so rich. Let's do
I'll
it.
tell you why somebody hasn't made a cookie called Oreodonts. That sounds not appetizing.
Really?
A dinosaur-shaped Oreo?
Yeah, dinosaur. Thank you.
Yeah.
Dinosaur-shaped Oreo.
Well,
It's not really
mammal-shaped.
dinosaur, but
Mammal-shaped.
an extinct
Anyways.
Oreo.
Anyways. So yeah, that's our little spot. But yeah, we would, I think, jump at the opportunity to go somewhere and do more cool stuff. Especially like I just want to go to like the big museums.
Yeah.
Somebody just send me to all the big museums so I could talk to all the cool people about all their cool stuff.
It is very research intensive or resource intensive to shoot on site.
Yeah.
This is not a done deal. Secret among us Eonites. We are in the early talking phases with the Smithsonian about going there late winter this year with the help of PBS to cover the renovation and reopening of their dinosaur hall in DC.
I can barely contain myself.
Yeah.
Like, they were like, would you be interested in going to the Smith? Yes.
Yeah. Don't even finish the sentence. Yes.
Send me, what do I need to do? Oh, talk to some people about their new dino hall.
You're like, how do you pay for it? They're like, I don't know. And then so we're in emailing phase about that.
But yeah, so everybody keep your fingers and toes crossed for us because.
Could you imagine?
Oh, you are going to see Nerding Out like you have never seen Nerding Out before. I get to go to That's like one of my dream museums to visit.
How do you feel about defining the Anthropocene or the idea that we're in a mass extinction?
Huh.
True.
Right. Those are two different questions, though, aren't they?
Yeah, so I'm not sure where I land on where to start the Anthropocene, because I personally like to have a rock type be a boundary layer and not an ice sheet, because that ice sheet's not going to be here forever, and we might not be here forever to keep an ice
Is that the
core
proposal,
in. So there's a couple different ways. So there was when humans started agriculture, we changed CO2 distribution levels in the atmosphere, and you can see that in ice core.
Mm-hmm.
So removing forests and making open grassland.
Oh, I see.
And the other one is the atomic bomb testing.
Mhm.
So the Bikini Atoll, I think, is the first one, and that put radioactive.
Or Trinity Site, New Mexico.
Yeah, Trinity in New Mexico. That put a radioactive layer that came down as dust. So there is a radioactive dust layer for that one. Then there's obviously the start of the American Revolution, or the Industrial Revolution is another one. But that one's a lot harder to pinpoint where, but I still think it's an ice core type. So me, in my traditional geology, would like it actually to be the nuclear testing. We have a date for that, an exact date.
Yeah, that's
1945, July something, 1945.
How easy is it to detect that, though?
It's pretty easy.
Is it really? Huh.
It's radioactive, so.
Free jazz.
There you go. I'll be here all week. But yeah, so that would be somewhere where if you had a really great outcropping of that layer, that sedimentary layer, wherever it is. It might not be completely solidified yet because it's 1945, and so like someday it will be, and someday there will be a radioactive layer for that. But I don't know. And then also, like, what about plastic? Like, could the plastic be the start of the Anthropocene? Because
that's something that we talked about too, and I guess it was the FAQ episode.
Yeah, so like I'm okay with making an Anthropocene. I think we have fingerprinted enough that we will be in the geological record as our own little mess of lithologies. So I'm okay with that, and I'm also okay with the 6th mass extinction. I mean, not personally okay in my heart of hearts, but like I'm okay with saying
be pro or con.
I'm okay with saying that we're in the midst of a mass extinction right now. Like, I can't even remember the numbers on like the amount of just mammals that we've lost in the past 100 years. It's insane. So definitely population, animal are decreasing. That usually equals extinction event. So
yeah, I mean, I'm sort of sympathetic to the argument. Two arguments about the Anthropocene. One is that it's human centric instead of geology centric. But I think if you were to find something that was global and was relatively easily detectable, so either carbon levels or radioactive isotopes, that would make sense. When it comes to things we've talked about, plastics, asphalt, just garbage. Concrete was another thing came up in that episode. My problem with that is that different parts of the world have industrialized at different paces, and so it's not consistent, and it's not global.
But what's 100 years in the rock record?
Yeah, that's true.
It's all going to get smashed down to basically the same 2 feet, probably. In some places not so much. I don't know.
And I don't know what to think about the extinction event. I don't know enough, frankly, to know how, like, the rate of extinction, how it compares to other periods. But I guess it's been. Is that something that, like, the International Union actually validates? Like, do they sort of certify extinction events the way they do geologic?
I don't think so. Like, the big 5 have been pretty well solidified, but also I think it's more historical, because we're finding now that some of the big 5, they weren't just this one extinction event. They were a bunch of tiny little extinction events all together at the end of a period. Or we're finding out that some of them weren't as bad as we thought they were. So the Triassic extinction, for a long time, we thought that all the coral disappeared. And then once sea chemistry returned to normal, the coral came back. But now we're finding some very, very early Jurassic areas with coral. So there were some areas that weren't destroyed completely. So there's not this hiatus that we used to think. So some of these are getting worse. Some of them are getting a little better. Some of them are being spread out. So I think it's one of those, if you take a general paleo course, you're going to learn about the big five. But then if you get into like the upper level credits, they're going to be like, well, it's not so cut and dry. You know, like there's some nuances to these. So we'll have to see.
One of our first episodes was about the extinction that didn't happen.
Oh, yeah.
And how, I guess it was in like the 40s or 50s. Up until then, there was an idea that there was a mass extinction after the Cambrian. And there certainly were extinction events, but it turned out not to be a mass extinction because, again, we ended up finding materials that don't typically fossilize well, that sort of existed beyond the Cambrian. And just because they had not been found, it was assumed that they had gone extinct earlier than they had.
Yeah.
Okay, it's 2:00.
Oh, already?
Oh, no.
That's so fun.
Seth and Mark, do you have anything to add? Any comments on Anthropocene or anything?
Do you have any comments?
Oh boy. Nope.
Yeah. No.
Okay.
Yay. Well, high fives to all you Eonites out there.
Thanks, fam.
Thanks so much.
Let's do it again.
Woo.
Yeah.
See you again at $5,000.